Do this to a man if you want him to open up emotionally. We're going to dive into this today. You know, it seems to me that the best relationships are couples who are genuinely friends with one another. And one of the common threads amongst friendship is the capacity to be vulnerable, the capacity to be authentic, the capacity to be transparent, but most importantly, to speak from your heart, from that sincere place of emotional connection. You see, these days we are no longer in need of transactional type relationships, particularly and thankfully so. Women aren't dependent upon men for financial survival. And because of that, I think it's time that when I say I think it's time, it's not like it hasn't been, happening, but I think it's time to be more emotional with one another. I think it's time to become from an expressive place. And yet, sadly, dating today, the entry point of relationship starts with dating. And again, we're not finding ourselves in arranged marriages. Oftentimes, we're not in a social environment with someone who we've known for a long period of time and developed this friendship. Today, dating has replaced that. And dating almost requires an accelerated learning curve. And sadly, most human beings operate from the perspective of attraction, entertainment, romance, and physical connection, attraction. Two people meet on a first date and they're not attracted to one another. Most likely, it's not going to lead to a second date. By the way, sometimes attraction is an unhealthy experience with another person. It might be lust, it might be limerence, it might be an insecure attachment, is what that attraction is. Let me repeat that: lust, limerence, or something insecure. In fact, many cases when two people meet and they're relatively attracted to one another, but they're not attracted to them. In other words, you find the person attractive. Those are oftentimes the best building blocks for a relationship, are those couples that weren't feeling that immediate force to one another. And I'm not suggesting that couples who don't have some sort of just a feeling or a knowing, but I mean this radical force to one another. It's those couples that operate from a place of calm. But then, coming back to what I'm saying, we've hyper focused on attraction, then entertainment. There's this expectation that the man is supposed to romance and entertain a person by taking out on lavish dates. I've heard some YouTubers talk, if a man doesn't take me out to dinner, he's never going to get a second date. I've heard some people say coffee dates. If a man suggests coffee, I'll never see him again. Well, you know what, ladies that might be doing that? I think you might be shooting yourself in the foot, because what's nice about a coffee date, there's no pressure of entertainment or romance. It's about connecting with one another. And then romance is this expectation to be courted and to be lavishly looked after to somebody who's a total stranger. Think about it. The first 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times you meet someone, they're still relatively a stranger if you haven't gotten to that emotional connection that I'm going to share with you that you should do and try going forward. And lastly, physical connection. See, today's dating and relationships hyper focus on that physical connection. And while the physical connection is radically important as the glue of keeping the relationship together, I believe physical intimacy is the icing on the cake. When you put too much pressure on that and not enough pressure on the emotional side and the heart, you're going to be setting yourself up potentially for failure. So, ladies, since my audience is mostly women, I just want you to know something. Most men are emotionally constipated. They haven't developed their emotional side. They haven't developed that side of being able to tap in to what's going on for them emotionally. And it makes it radically difficult. Now, you can hold out for that emotionally mature man that exists, that emotionally expressive man. But guess what? There are a lot of men who are just diamonds in the rough. And if you kind of learn this, you might be able to you might find someone who can open up emotionally. Now, here's the tricky part, and we've got to be a little bit of a detective here. Humans that have been wounded by their past relationships or have unresolved childhood wounds and traumas makes it very difficult for them to open up emotionally. I'm going to repeat that. Those have been wounded by their past relationships and had childhood traumas. that have gone unhealed makes it very difficult for them to open up emotionally. Now, when I say the word trauma, I'm not talking about physical abuse. I'm talking about everyday languaging that oftentimes you could have two really good parents that unintentionally have said things. I'm guilty of this. I'm guilty of being overprotective of my son, especially after my youngest son passed away. And I'm sure my languaging unintentionally coming from a place of love has had trauma to him, my son. I didn't do it intentionally. I'm just aware that it exists. Being overprotective sometimes can have a damaging effect. And again, we trivialize those small things, but believe it or not, it's the small things that oftentimes needs as much healing as the big things. Okay. So again, we can dismiss our childhood, or we could say, hey, how have I been hurt and how can I heal? That's one way of approaching it. Whether it's the man you're in a relationship or you yourself watching this. And our adult pains, the ending of a significant relationship, going through a divorce. Folks, a divorce is the unraveling of the tapestry of your life with another human being. And it can cause a lot of complications in the dating process because we have a population of walking wounded, both men and women alike. But men tend to be a little bit more emotionally constipated. Some are emotional zombies, and some are known as emotionally unavailable. And yet, there could be a diamond in the rough. So, how do we shift this? How do we get a man to open up emotionally? I think it starts by set an example set the example within yourself without compromising yourself. What I mean is, I've always talked about this in my videos. Be vulnerable, be authentic, be transparent without divulging any secrets, but share your fears and your insecurities. See, folks, I think it's time to start not from the good in a relationship, but to start from what's your greatest fear. And share your examples, share that with someone. Share that question, share that part of yourself to him. What's your fears and insecurities around relationships? I think if couples did that, I know, by the way, Jonathan, you're never supposed to do that. I know, Jonathan, I've been told by so many other coaches, I'm just supposed to sit in my feminine energy and let a man lead. Ha, 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 ha. By the way, I do that satire because I'm here to encourage intentional approach to relationships and not sort of some passive perspective that men know what they're doing. Ladies, most men, as I said, are emotionally constipated. They're uncertain in the dating realm, particularly in the realm that I talk to, that after baby making years and before retirement, because roughly 75% of singles in this age bracket are divorced. And as I said earlier, divorce comes with it a lot of emotional trauma. Okay. So, recognizing that this is who you are with, set an example and be as open as possible, as I said before, without compromising a boundary. Be vulnerable about your fears and insecurities. And as I was saying earlier, why not share this if two people like each other and they genuinely want to see each other, then start from being vulnerable, authentic, and transparent without compromising yourself. Okay. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Don't force the relationship. It's a mutual investment with one another. Don't force the relationship. In other words, don't add to, if he's incapable of getting there, then you have to evaluate for yourself. But don't force someone because you think they're a diamond in the rough, because you think there's potential. This is where women get so messed up. Sometimes they see the potential. And this requires going deeper than the surface. So as I said a moment ago, set the example. The number 3 thing to do is ask questions using feeling statements. It's not about how's your day going? Did you have a good day? But certainly, what lit you up today? What brought you joy? That would be a question. But coming back to those early stages of dating, I think saying, if you shared what's your greatest fear, then ask him, what's your greatest fear in a relationship? What's your fear around commitment? Ask these questions. Do you have any insecurities about yourself? Many men, particularly after a divorce, are fearful of making a commitment to another human being. Well, then, if you're afraid of doing that, then do you want to invest with someone who hasn't overcome that fear? Now, I know personally, I have a fear of disappointing someone. You know what? Because I'm not perfect. I'm aware of my imperfections, my insecurities, my fears, my negative patterns, and limiting beliefs. So I have a fear around that. And I'm upfront about it. Not that I would do it and not that I'm not willing to overcome it, but I'm aware of it. See, when couples start being curious with one another, asking questions of one another from a heart centered place, really getting to the emotions, to the heart, not like, oh my God, you're so wonderful. I feel so amazing with you, because they're amped up on testosterone and dopamine and serotonin and, all the cocktails, the chemical cocktail, once, because we want physical intimacy with someone. I'm talking about putting the physical intimacy aside and really, are you building friendship with one another? By the way, it's 11:11 on the clock right now. See, remember I started this conversation, the couples that seem to do the best are the ones that are genuinely good friends with one another. And another way to build friendship is when you're in the car, is talk to one another. I read an article just the other day that said talking in the car with one another when you have a long ride, instead of, I've got to be focused on the road and don't say anything to me. I mean, come on. You know what? This is a great opportunity to connect with one another, you know, and really share how you feel about relationships. I know a couple that had a 10-hour drive, and the whole time they were laughing and singing and they were talking with one another. They were connecting at that heart-centered level, and not the performative, entertaining, how's your day kind of superficial things, but really the important things in life, and sharing about that. Now, ladies, you have to take into account a person's personality. Engineer, nerds, doctors, for example, or even blue collar people, they all have a different personality to them. Salespeople, for example, you know, engineers, nerds are in their head a lot, okay? Doctors, nurses, things like that, they're caretakers. They have a different personality with them. And blue collar people are oftentimes in their bodies, so to speak. So take into account this person's personality. And by the way, everything I've shared so far in this video, men who are watching this, you need to be doing the same thing, okay? Set an example. Don't force the relationship. Be curious. Ask questions. Talk in the car. And take your partner's personality into consideration. I happen to be what's known as a sapiosexual. I'm attracted to intellect and emotions. That's what gets me off. That's what turns me on for me personally. And know what your personality type is. And by the way, there's a gazillion quizzes to learn about a person's personality. These are things you can do together to build that emotional connection with one another. Let's stop operating from a performative basis and let's start operating from a heart-centered basis. But Jonathan, I've got duct tape on my here, let me put this on. Many of you ladies are fearful of speaking up because you're afraid you're going to lose someone. And I'm here to say, speaking up is how you gain intimacy with one another. Intimacy. Into me, you see. How are we going to see someone if we're not curious? And curiosity requires a bit of imagination beyond the surface. And yes, I know you can go online right now and read the 36 ways to build a relationship with one another, which is great. You can get cards like this, the intimacy cards. It's called Best Self, and start talking to one another. That's how you're going to get to know one another, is through inquiry. Now, I said talking. Talk while doing something else. You know, I remember years ago, I went to Disneyland with a woman on a second date. And by the way, if you've never been to Disneyland or any amusement park, there's a lot of lines where you're stuck in them for 30 minutes to an hour in some cases. And in this particular case, we talk to one another. I know in most of my relationships, we'd cook together. And during that time, we would talk and play and be curious about one another and crack jokes to one another. You know, folks, men aren't good at this. You know, this requires looking at it like planting a seed in the ground. You can plant the seed, water it, and wake up the next morning expecting a big, gigantic tree. Or this is something you can do to practice with one another, to be curious with one another. Maybe listen to a podcast together and then unpack the podcast afterwards just to see how you felt about the what you learned in this particular case. But you have to give men room to grow. Just recognize that we men weren't conditioned to tap into our emotional side, especially us baby boomers, or I'm tail end baby boomer, Gen Xer, but certainly baby boomers or Gen Xers. We weren't given permission to be emotionally expressive. We weren't given permission to connect with our heart. So you got to give them a little bit of room. Remember, I started this conversation. Do you have a diamond in the rough? Do you have a diamond in the rough? Now, is this going to be the end all be all? No. I'm here to offer perspective. See, I'm here to suggest to stop dating from that attraction, entertainment, romance, and physical connection perspective, and start building a relationship from the emotional side, from that friendship place. And when you think about friends are the people you can't wait to call and talk about your joys, and friends are those people that you go, I need support, I need your help, can you be there for me? Those are the couples that seem to be thriving, and those are the couples that have a strong friendship and emotional connection with one another. And it takes some understanding, some patience, some intentionality. And I think it's time to stop the performative, naive, ambiguous way people are dating to get to that level of friendship. Is this sinking in? Is this resonating with you? I hope it is. If it is, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what I just shared. Post a comment below. I do my best to read them all in the first 24 hours. As always, if you find value in my videos, please hit that like button. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you can be notified of new videos. And if you want to connect with me directly, hey, there's links below. Schedule a discovery call with me to see if working with a coach is right for you. There's links to get my books, to get all the books I recommend, to follow me on social media, and even join my monthly membership group, all listed below. All right, I'm going to wrap up this video as I always do. First off, giving myself a big, gigantic Jonathan Barrick of self-love. I'm going to reach into the camera and give you a hug of love if that's okay. I'm going to ask you to turn to someone, a pet, a teddy bear, a pillow, and give it or them a hug of love, because hugs are a great source of love. And let's face it, we could all use more love in our lives. Thanks a bunch. Bye-bye now.